Recording in progress.
Good morning, dear
I think you need a mute like this.
brothers and sisters. Holy Yidden. Welcome to our daily Gemara discussion at Talmud Chabura. We're studying the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Yes, right now it's chapter 19 of Maseches Shabbos, Kuf Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, 131b. Today, we should say the date, Thursday, the 28th of Koyach of Shabbos, and Sunday will be Rosh Chodesh, and it is August 25th. In Florida, a number of the schools have already begun. A few of the Jewish schools are starting next week, and so we are in good times. As you may recall, we've been studying the chapter called Rabbi Eliezer de Mila. The overarching general theme is bris, circumcision on Shabbos. Everybody just about seems to agree you're allowed to do the act of circumcision on Shabbos if it's the child's 8th day. So Mila Bismana, bris can be done on the 8th day. Question is, what about the things that get us to the bris? And so that led us to a conversation about carrying the knife, creating the knife, different opinions, without going through all the specifics. Rabbi Eliezer, suffice it to say, is the most permissive. He allows anything to bring a bris about on Shabbos. Is it something specific about bris that Rabbi Eliezer has such a permissive viewpoint, or is it a general philosophy? Is it a general attitude of Rabbi Eliezer? So we have a statement by Rabbi Yochanan, who says that Rabbi Eliezer doesn't always say that Machshirie Madeicha Shabbos, push off Shabbos, which leads us on an exploration. Which mitzvah is it that Rabbi Eliezer says you're not allowed to prepare for Shabbos? And so, we went through a number of mitzvahs. All the holiday mitzvahs are permitted to be done. You're allowed to prepare for Shabbos according to Rabbi Eliezer, but he does not allow the same for affixing tzitzis and a mezuzah. And we discussed a little bit why it could have been done before Shabbos, or you could have made it ownerless. We've then, hold on one second, we've then gone through a series of all the mitzvahs: matzah, lulav and esrog, oimer, shtehalechem, sukkah, shofar, all of them where Rabbi Eliezer says you're allowed to do them on Shabbos, or you're allowed to prepare for them on Shabbos. Each one needed to have a scriptural source. We used a lot of Gzeira Shava, apparent redundancies, or common words reflected in two contexts. And that was what we've been going through, and we're up to Mitzvah Shofar. Before we continue, hold on, Reb Beryl wanted to say something, but before that, Professor Stern, are you on? So I saw a note that your colleague apparently is passing as a funeral today. So should we dedicate our learning today? We'll dedicate today's learning for Dr. Elio. And we pray for only good news. Only good news for all of Klal Yisrael, and for you and yours. And so whenever you have to go, we understand that. I'm sorry that's why we're going to be missing you today. And now,
Rabbi.
Yes.
Rabbi, what's the halachic requirement to find out who the moil is?
Do me a favor. Let's hold off on that.
Okay. Put it on the list.
All I will say is that in the old world, to become a mohel, you had to have a willing parent to allow you to circumcise the child. No parent in their right mind is going to allow an unexperienced mohel to do a circumcision. So generally speaking, to be a mohel, you needed to first administer a on your own child, because if you're willing to circumcise your own child, then you've had experience, and usually a parent is not going to harm their child, hopefully. So this is not a halachic requirement, but it was apparently that was the thing. Today there's much more rigorous training programs where a person has to both be very, very knowledgeable in halacha, and you'd have to intern for a significant amount of time with a expert mohel, and then at a certain point the expert mohel would oversee the administration of circumcision. So this is not a halachic criteria, or not exclusively halachic criteria, but that is the process today. And the reality is that sometimes there have been mohels that have been disbarred, either because they weren't very good at it, or their hand became shaky, or whatever else. But that's not really our conversation. Our conversation is more the arum, the other aspects of bris milah, and if that could be done on Shabbos. I hit mute all again because there's an echo, but please unmute for comments, questions. I'm going to share the screen and we can get started. And again, if anybody had something that they needed to ask or share, now would be a wonderful time to do so as we get to our Gemara.
I wouldn't be surprised if Rabbi Eliezer was a mohel. He's so liberal.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So the question I want to ask is, what happens if there was one mohel in a matter of 4 towns, and he had to be in 3 places at the same time, and he couldn't get to the town in time? How does he do the 8th day? Could he go 7 days? Could he go 9 days?
Good question. Let's try to stay focused on this right now, on specifically Shabbos. We're talking about the intersection of circumcision and Shabbos.
Okay,
Let's put all other aspects of circumcision on the side. Although I will tell you that's an interesting question, and I would say that a mohel should have a good secretary or a good calendar, and first come, first serve. But anyways, there's a lot more to discuss. But let's stick to the intersection of circumcision and Shabbos for the moment. Just scrolling to the exact place we left off. As you can see, we talked about lulav, we talked about sukkah, we talked about matzah. The thing that was distinct about matzah, we said, was that matzah is a not universal. It's a more broadly encompassing mitzvah because both men and women are biblically obligated to do that, to eat matzah. And now we're going to continue with our process of analyzing each mitzvah we're in. Rabbi Eliezer said that you may do preparatory acts even though they desecrate Shabbos to bring to the mitzvah, and we're going to probe why and where, as well as compare and contrast Rabbi Eliezer's take on the verses to the Chachamim who disagree with him. And so we're going to continue in the same exercise. If you've noticed, there's a very solid template almost to analyze each of the different mitzvahs that have been brought up previously quoted by the Brisa. And so we're going to continue more or less following that format for a few more lines, and then we're going to move on to the next discussion, which will be more directly the question of bris on Shabbos. So again, I want to thank you all for being here, and let's jump right in. Shofar v'chol Machshirav doichen es haShabbos divrei Rabbi Eliezer. The mitzvah of shofar and all of the facilitating steps, all of the things that bring to shofar happening on Shabbos. Obviously, we're talking about Shabbos that is also a Rosh Hashanah, right? They can be doiche Shabbos. All the preliminary steps leading up to it.
How do we get to the point now where we don't blow shofar on Shabbos? And if this is,
why don't we blow the shofar on Shabbos? So again, admittedly, this is close enough related. There's a famous Gzeira de Rabba. In the time of the Gemara, there was a Gzeira restricting the application of many mitzvahs on Yontif that also coincide on Shabbos, because there was a large number of people that were being mechal Shabbos. Where did we see that Gzeira de Rabba? We had it here, I think. Anybody recall the citation? But midaraisa, and prior to this enactment, mitzvahs could be done on Shabbos. Let's see the Gemara's analysis. Let's see the Gemara's conversation about shofar. Good question. Well, let me see if the computer is working a little slow today, but let me see if I could remember the source, and then we can take a look. Shofar v'chol Machshirie that is a Shabbos divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says that not only can a shofar be blown on Shabbos, but anything that leads to the shofar being available can be done on Shabbos. Minalei Rabbi Eliezer ha. What would be Rabbi Eliezer's source? Where did he get this halacha? Where does he get his opinion? Rabbi Eliezer can't pull an opinion out of a hat. It needs to be premised on based on our understanding of Rabbi Eliezer, it needs to be premised on some kind of biblical inference, or we need to have a rationally sound and Talmudically consistent way to learn from one mitzvah to the other, and that's the journey we're going to continue probing of Rabbi Eliezer. So there, of course, are a number of mitzvahs that we've already established we do desecrate Shabbos according to Rabbi Eliezer in order to bring them to happen. I should note, when I say the word desecration, I'm not trying to be medayik over here. It's not actually chilul Shabbos because you're allowed to do it. There's a question if we consider Shabbos deferred or entirely permitted. I'm using the word broadly just so we appreciate that the act that we're doing would otherwise be chilul Shabbos. So I want to just clarify my language. So where do we know that we could be desecrate Shabbos to do shofar? And where do we know that we could do so for its machshirim, its preliminary facilitating steps? So the first candidate is going to be the first mitzvah that we clearly referenced in a series of brises. Well, the korban omer and shtei halechem are the two grain offerings brought at the beginning of the 7 weeks of the omer and at the end of the 7 weeks on Shavuos. And to do them, one may desecrate Shabbos to have the grain. Well, those are not a good source for shofar because those are part of the temple rite. Those are part of the broader Korban Beis Hamikdash national rituals. And therefore, maybe we'll give a waiver for those, but not for a private mitzvah. Although shofar is blown in a public setting, it is when the shofar is blown in a public setting, it is enabling every individual to fulfill the mitzvah, to fulfill their private individual obligation. And if the shofar was sounded in shul, but the individual didn't hear the shofar, they did not discharge their obligation. Ime lulav. What about lulav? Maybe we could learn that if you could do lulav and you can even chop a lulav off a tree, for sure you can prepare a shofar for Shabbos to be blown. Well, no, lulav has something that makes it super distinct. Shekenton arba minim. It has 4 different components, and it just puts lulav into its own universe, and we are not able to properly or confidently compare the halachas of shofar to lulav. What about sukkah? Imi sukkah. Well, no, there's something specific about sukkah that sets it apart from shofar. Shekinoi heges beleilos bayamim. Sukkah is a mitzvah, and it's unique in this regards, where it's a holiday mitzvah that is done at day and night, unlike all the other mitzvahs enumerated, which are either night or day. Imi matzah, well, matzah, that's the last one standing. Well, matzah has something that sets it apart. Shonbar, you want to soccer? I just missed a call from him. Yeah. He's confused. Yeah, give him a call. Sorry. Well, what about matzah? Well, matzah has something unique that sets it apart and makes us not able to compare the laws of matzah to shofar. Shekinoi heges benashim kiva anashim. Matzah is unique that men and women alike observe and are biblically chayiv to eat matzah on Pesach. So now that we've exhausted all of the possible comparative mitzvahs, we're now going to go and say, no, there must be a biblical source. What would Rabbi Eliezer say? Allah Amar Kra. Hold on, there's getting some terrible rustling. I'm going to mute all again, but again, please unmute so we can hear your wisdom and questions. Elam Akra, rather, we need a biblical source. Yom Teruah Yelochem. The Torah describes that Rosh Hashanah will be or should be a Yom Teruah Yelochem, a day of shofar sounding. Now that I learned Safaria's newest thing, where they link the pasuk here, let's take a look. 7th month, that's Tishrei Be'echad HaChodesh, on the first day of the month. Mikra Chodesh Yelochem. It'll be a day that's sanctified. We do not do malacha. Yom Teruah Yelochem. It shall be a day of sounding the shofar. The fact that we use the word Yom Teruah as we've done before shows us that it's got to be, and that extra word tells us that it's even done on Shabbos. Yom Teruah Yelochem, a day of sounding the shofar. Let's see, the Gemara continues.
Rabbi,
Yes.
isn't there a link between the mikvah and the sukkah, where we're surrounded with one with God?
In a esoteric, mystical sense, yes, but not in a strictly halachic sense, and
No.
not for the purposes of this attempt to find a source that you could be you could be Doicha Shabbos to bring to Shofar. So that is true. There is a deep mystical association between the all-encompassing mikvah and the surrounding energy of the sukkah, but not for the purposes of it. I mean, not for the technical, halachic, and analytical purposes of our Gemara. The Torah could have said, on this day of Rosh Hashanah, don't do work, Trua Yelachem, and it's a day of shofar sounding. The word Yom Trua, although it has a nice ring, and this is what we're familiar with, so it sounds right, the Torah could have avoided the word Yom, and we would have fully understood that you got to blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah. The word Yom is extra to give a certain emphasis. And so the Gemara understands that that word Yom is here to tell us it's going to happen. It's got to happen even on Shabbos, because shofar is an incredibly important mitzvah. It is an incredibly important mitzvah, which, Mark, of course, this brings back to your question, which is, if you're telling me that it is so important, the Torah itself, according to Rabbi Eliezer, even allows acts of breaking Shabbos to facilitate, to bring it to the table, to make it possible. And you're telling me that we're not allowed to do it on Shabbos? That's a good question and worthy of further exploration at the right time. Dr. Hammer, I hope you'll note.
That's a list. Same thing with Lulav also. I mean,
yeah. All the mitzvahs that are pushed off by the Gzeira de Rabbah, it is a profoundly shocking Gzeira, because it utterly dislodges a very fundamental mitzvah of the Torah, or at least from being done on Shabbos. And I'll take it a step further. Especially when it comes to shofar, and you principally only have one day to do the mitzvah deraisa. And so the Chachamim, out of a concern for possibly a derabanan, for a maybe, they dislodge a deraisa. So it's a big question, and there's a lot of discussion in the halachic text and in Machshava and in Hasidus and in Kabbalah. It's one of those very, very big topics that is a gateway to many conversations.
you get one other complication. When you have the Sfeika Diyoma, and we throw in the second day, when it's the end of the Yontif, you're putting on tefillin and deraisa for the Rabbanan.
Except,
Israel, I don't have that
hold on,
problem.
Mark, you'll appreciate this.
Yeah.
Lo adu rosh. What does that mean? Lo adu rosh. That Rosh Hashanah never falls out an Aleph, Dalet, or
Right,
Vav.
Rosh Hashanah doesn't. Yeah, right. Rosh Hashanah doesn't.
So
Rosh
Lamaisa,
Hashanah
the way
never
the
falls.
calendar is structured today, you'll never have.
But like, for example, the last day of Pesach, which is if it's in Huslar, it's its second day, and
Right.
but then you're not putting on stone, which is the Teresa, you're doing for.
It's a much bigger deal.
Yeah.
To not blow shofar.
Oh,
Which
of course.
Not
Yeah.
which
Oh,
is,
yeah.
Right. It doesn't
It's
say
right
put
there
on
on the
tefillin
top.
every day. So there are those that say that I'm not advocating not to put on tefillin, but there's a specific day in the year that you're meant to blow shofar. And the Chazal, it shows us the koyach of Rabbanan. It shows us the koyach that the Torah has imbued to Chazal to really tamper with Jewish ritual, let's say. Now, again, we're really not doing justice to the sugya, because
Because here we're saying
in the Mikdash you could blow shofar. It's not.
Here they're saying you could actually make the shofar on Shabbos if you had to, or carry it, and now they're saying no, we don't do it at all. Even
Well, let's note that Rabbi Eliezer preceded the Gzeira not to blow shofar on Shabbos, and I wonder if he would sign off on such a Gzeira. But anyways, let's come back to the Gemara. So the Gemara says that we have an extra word, Yom Tiro Yelachem, and Rabbi Eliezer would use that verse to tell us that you're allowed, you must have the shofar happen, even if it means Machshirie mitzvah, even if it means you got to take out your drill or your hammer or boil up a pot of water and extract the cartilage or whatever else, or carry the shofar, whatever other malacha that's not immediately the sounding of the shofar. So the Gemara is now going to probe this a little bit. Ulamai, why does the Torah need to add a word hayom? This is part of getting us to our destination. Now, why does the Torah need to emphasize Yom Teruah? What chiddush is it teaching us? You'll say, you know what? It's not telling us hechsher mitzvah. It's telling us that you're allowed to do the malacha of blowing a shofar. Sounding a horn doesn't sound Shabbistic. That's not what Yom is about. Hatana de Shmuel. There's an important teaching from the school of Shmuel that says, Komaleches avoida loy tasu. When the Torah says on Shabbos, don't do meleches. When it says on Yontif, komaleches avoida loy tasu, that you should not do any meleches avoida. You should not do. Give me a good translation. Komaleches avoida. Don't do any malacha. That's avoida.
I think the translation usually late laborious work. Yeah, extra work that's really labor, I guess, because it's
labor of work. We just say kol avoida loy tasu or komalacha loy tasu.
But kol avoida is Shabbos. Shabbos and Yom Kippur. It means no work at all.
So let's see. Meleches avoida is here to tell us to exclude two acts that don't exactly fall into the world of meleches avoida. Yatzasa, this excludes that there is no restriction for tkiyas shofar, for sounding the shofar, or dias hapas, and for the act of removing bread from the old world tanur, tandur, tubun. Remember, we discussed all the different names for that kind of oven, where you'd attach the dough to the wall, and there was an art to delicately, but fully remove it without, So those two acts are not melacha. They don't fall into the category of meleches avoid, and they can be done on Yontif. Why? She chachma ve'einoi melacha. They are an art, not a labor. Okay, maybe the word chachma, maybe you don't like my translation as art. It's a trick. It's a kunst. It's a technique, but not a malach. Rabbi Steinsaltz says they are skills, not labor. Okay. It's a skill, but it's not a malach. Let's read Rashi. Ulamai. Hi Kra. Hi Milsa the Trua, also the Machshirie b'Shabbos. What facet of Shabbos what act is being allowed on Shabbos? If you think the Torah is telling me you're allowed to blow the shofar, I don't need that pasuk. Even to randomly play with the shofar on Shabbos is not a biblical prohibition. You're not allowed to do it. It's asher d'Rabbanan, but it is not a dioraisa. So therefore, what does the word Yom teach us? Ella le-machshirin. It's coming to tell us that we can do steps that facilitate the shofar. Rashi, by the way, how does he translate meleches avoida? That it's a tircha. It's a labor. It's a labor. It's not a labor. It says it's a art, a skill. You want to see the Meiri's take on it? Same thing. Tkiyas shofar chachmahi. This is just how he summarizes the Gemara. It's a chachma. It's not a labor. Therefore, biblically, even random, unwarranted shofar blowing is not a deraisa. It's only prohibited from Chazal. The rabbis prohibit it. The Tkiyas mitzvah, nesra migzera. Okay, here. This is the point that's not immediately in our Gemara, but I want to show it to you. Tkiyas mitzvah, nesra migzeras. It's prohibited as a gzera to avoid carrying them in the public domain. So anyways, he summarizes and recaps the fullness of that discussion. So Rabbi Eliezer uses this extra Yom Teruah to tell us that there is a special license to bring to the shofar, even if it's Mechalel Shabbos, even if you're technically breaking or doing an act that is generally not allowed on Shabbos. And this is Rabbi Elazar's source to get to do hechsher, to prepare and to bring the shofar to the table on Shabbos. Well, that was such a compelling case. You got to really try to understand why the Rabbanan don't allow Machshirie. How could the rabbis read this verse any other way? How could the rabbis not agree that you must do anything you need to do to have the shofar blown on Shabbos? Well, what is their reason? Rabbanan. Nah, we use the word yoim for a very different lesson. Hahu mivoyele, bayoim, veloy, balayla. It's to teach us that the mitzvah of shofar is dafke yoim trua. It's the daytime. That's when you do the trua, not layla. Okay, that's actually a very good answer. Now, what's Rabbi Eliezer going to do? How does Rabbi Eliezer know that shofar is only a mitzvah to be done in the daytime? Rabbi Eliezer, bayoim, veloy, balayla, minole. Nafkele, he has another source, which we might initially think is a little more convoluted, but it is consistent with the method of Chazal's extracting halacha and insight from the Torah, because it says b'yom hakipurim taviru shofar b'chol artzachem. In Yom Kippur, there's also the sounding of the shofar by Yovel, if I'm not mistaken. Right? Let's do the same thing we've done before. Anach. Open. Yeah, here we go. Just for the fullness of the record. This is Bahar. When you arrive to the land, Shabbos Lashem, there's going to be a year of rest. What's the year of rest? What we call Shemitah, the sabbatical year, which is this year. Sheish Shanim Tizra Sadecha. 6 years, work the land, do all your stuff. Shabbos, Shabbos, and the land must rest. There's all different restrictions. And it applies to all your folks and your animals, your livestock. You have to count 7 years, and every 7th year, I misspoke. You count 7 cycles, and then you have a yovel. Mavarta, shofar, trua, b'chodesh, hashivas, al-chodesh, and then there's a special sounding on Yom Kippur, the Kiddush, Shnas HaChamishim Shana, and then you inaugurate, you formalize, you sanctify the 50th year, which we call the Jubilee year, the Yovel year. Anyways, the point of the pasuk here, that's the context, but the point that we're introducing here is that shofar sounded b'Yom Kippurim, and the day of Kippur. We describe the holiday as Yom Kippurim, and we describe the full 24, 25 hours. Okay, they just unloaded us. Hold on. But ultimately, the Chazal are medayik that it means dafka daytime. So on Yom Kippur, we understand that when the shofar is sounded, it's in the daytime. V'gamri mehadadi, and we learn the halachic facts. We use this pasuk to inform us about shofar, Rashi, Mesechas Rosh Hashanah. This limud that's being dropped in passing is elaborated in the Gemara in Mesechas Rosh Hashanah. She'ein tamalim rechedesh hashvila b'chachma kari. Basically, this verse teaches us that whenever you sound the shofar in the 7th month, whenever you sound the shofar in Tishrei, it follows the same formula. It's in the daytime, and therefore we understand, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that we sound the shofar in the daytime, but it's based on a limud from this verse that's describing the Jubilee year. So just to recap, Rabbi Eliezer says, Yom Teruah, you sound the shofar on the day, even if it's Shabbos. It's not teaching us about the act of blowing the shofar, because that's allowed anyways. It's teaching us to prepare. The Chachamim have a different take on that pasuk. They use that pasuk to teach us that shofar is only blown in the day, not at night. Rabbi Eliezer says, I didn't need that because I already know from another pasuk that whenever you blow the shofar on Tishrei, you blow it in the daytime. Although it sounds a little bit of a stretch to us, but in fact, when we learn Gemara Mesechus Rosh Hashanah, we'll understand that this is a pretty open and clear limud, at least according to Rabbi Eliezer. But based on this reading, we can understand why the Chachamim might not be comfortable with this. They will probably want something a little more explicit, a little more clear. And anyways, it's consistent with the Chachamim's take that you're not allowed to do Hechsher Mitzvah. You're not allowed to do other malachas to bring a shofar to the table. You can blow the shofar itself.
Rabbi?
Yes.
So when we blow the shofar at the end of Yom Kippur, it's no longer Yom Kippur. Is that what you're saying?
I don't believe the sounding of the shofar at the end of Yom Kippur. I'm gonna express great ignorance right now, but I don't believe that when we sound the shofar at the end of Yom Kippur, it has a biblical. It's a biblical nature.
Okay.
Rabbi,
Beryl, yes.
the problem of day and night, again, in certain parts of the world, it might well be dark.
Okay.
So are we really looking at day versus night, or that specific day on the calendar?
We had that conversation. Let's defer it. Suffice it to say that most places day and night are pretty clear, and in the places where it's ambiguous, we'll let them have fun calling all the big poskim and figuring it out. But as a general rule, we can draw a correlation between day and light, and night and dark, right?
No, but I know where I'm going with that. The Hebrew Hayom might refer to the day on the calendar, not so much day or night. Maybe I'm
So
off
that would
base.
be in our language. But in the Hebrew language, there is an absolute correlation between Yom and the time that is light, and Laila and the time that is dark. So this is an instance, by the way, this is a very good point, because I always love to harp on this. This is an instance where translation never fully captures the spirit of an original statement, because every language has essentially a culture or a nuance. And so in some cultures, Yom could be the date on the calendar. And in another culture, Yom could mean when it's light outside. In a third, it could mean the day of the week. And that's that. Is that it, Doctor?
So when we say Kiddush Vayihi Erev Vayihi Voke Yom HaShishi, it confuses everything that you're saying. When did this happen? When do you do
You know
this?
what, Dr. Hammer?
It's very loose, very loose. Yeah.
You're asking a very, very good question, and it warrants further exploration. But I'm going here on the fly, so if I'm going to continue, I'll probably get in more tripped up. So let's
I'll put it on the list, no problem.
let's put it on the list. Suffice it to say, the Chazal here are using the word Yom to mean, in this context, during daytime. But Dr. Hammer, you have supported Rabbi to make it a good case that Yom sometimes means daytime, sometimes it means a 24-hour unit, sometimes it means the fullness of a cycle of light and dark. And so we do need to probe where, when, and why. And maybe we need to hire a expert linguist to help us really probe this question. It's a good one. But Beryl, I'll default to my initial reaction, which is, although there are cases of ambiguity,
I think Chazal use it.
I'm sorry?
I think Chazal use Yom,
Right.
the definition, wherever it suits them. This way, one time this way, one time this way. It depends what
I'm
suits
not,
them.
I don't like, I appreciate your, how do you call it? Your characterization. My gut wants to push back, but I'll defer it to Dr. Hammer's list.
Okay.
I don't feel comfortable saying that they just randomly use it as it wills them, but we could do more to figure out when and why they might use one definition or another, and it's a fair point that needs further exploration. So Bli Nether, unless doctors, I'm sorry, I cut you off, Dr. Stone. Do you have a specific citation that would okay? So then we'll add it to Dr. Hammer's list, and I look forward to. I personally am very interested in these kind of analysis of, so I'd like to revisit it, Bli Nether, but I'm certain that that work has been.
Yeah, I mean, basically, even here, when you look at this case, so there are two different explanations for Yom. They're not giving the reason for why, to support why they're using the word Yom in their own, any supporting evidence. So for Rabbi Eliezer, he feels he needs the word Yom to support his. And Rabbanan need the Yom a different way to support theirs.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I understood what you're saying. No, I mean not no. Yes, the Chachamim, and there's two possible diukim you can make on the word Yom. But I think that there is an agree. You know what? I'm going to back out because let's revisit this. It's very interesting and worthy of further exploration. But I want to do it with research, not with shkoyach. It's true. The rabbis and Rabbi Eliezer have different ways of analyzing the pasuk. And what I suspect, and I'm stopping because I don't want to say something without actually researching it, is that many times, if we'll do a search of the arguments between the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer, we will find, or other such instances, we will find that there actually is a principle, a fundamental disagreement on a definition or a general philosophy of preferring either the tightness of the specificity of language versus the context. And so there is scholarship that does that work, but I just don't want to weigh in further without doing the research. So Dr. Stamler, I want to thank you for bringing that up, and Blina, I do want to revisit it. But let's go through the Gemara a little further. Yashkoyach Doctor and Yashkoyach Doctor and Rebberal for opening the can of worms. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to go back, continuing along a template. Maybe the Torah should only teach us Yom Trua, that we do malacha to lead to shofar, and that could be the source, and that would teach us to all the other mitzvahs of the Torah that we talked about, that you could also do Shabbos. Following the template, the Gemara is going to assert, no, there is something distinct about shofar that sets it apart from all other mitzvahs. We cannot learn from the shofar blowing on Rosh Hashanah because shofar is so important. It's not necessarily comparable to other mitzvahs, because the shofar, the purpose of shofar is to bring forth the recall of the Jewish people before Hashem. Shofar is something about the relationship of the Jewish people and Klal Yisrael. And therefore, it's too unique, too special to necessarily be a raya for other mitzvahs. The sounding of the shofar on Yom Kippur on Shemitah, or Yovel rather, cannot be the source to other mitzvahs. Why? There's something specific about the sounding of that shofar. Taku beis din shofar. Niftru avadim libatayim v'sades chayzers liba'aleim. In the Jubilee year, the sounding of the shofar was massive. It was a massive deal. It needs to happen because that's the point where people have been waiting for 50 years, possibly, for their freedom. And it's the time where real estate, where all the land leases reset, and it goes back to their original ownership. This is such an essential moment that there's no chance that's going to be deferred because of any complication and pushed off because of Shabbos. Maybe other mitzvahs are not as significant, not as essential. This is my take on this, on the Gemara's wording. If you understand it differently, I welcome that.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Rabbi, given this intense discussion, when the rabbis ruled not to blow shofar on Shabbos, do we have that in the Talmud again with a kind of discussion both ways, or it just comes out as a din?
Like always, there's big discussions. We actually, I believe, already studied. Let me hold on one second. Give me 1 second. Let me just see if I can. Bear with me, folks.
Is it possible there were times when they did blow shofar on Shabbos?
What do you mean? Of course, before the Gzera.
Yeah,
For thousands of years.
yeah.
I just want to find the best citation.
So they went according to Rabbi Eliezer.
No. Hold on. Let's back up. There's three issues here, or there's three possibilities. We have in Rabbi Eliezer's community, those who followed his psak, they carried a knife to the bris on Shabbos in the streets. They probably also, if need be, fixed up, cooked up, made a shofar on Shabbos. You then had the rest of the Jewish people in the time of Rabbi Eliezer, who also sounded the shofar on Shabbos, because shofar pushes off Shabbos. That was a biblical, universal value among the Jewish people. And then you had, at the time of, the Gzeira de Rabba, which may actually predate Rabba, but it's called the Gzeira de Rabba, because he asserts it and explains it in the Gemara, where, see if I could pull it up here. Here, come with me for a moment. Actually, let me get the English and the Hebrew. Of course, now I lost the place. Hold on. This is a Gemara talking about Megillah on Shabbos. But in the context and the process of that conversation, the Gemara brings up here. The Kuli Alma, Mia Megillah b'Shabbos like Karin and Tachlis. We don't read Megillah on Shabbos. Why? Rabbi clarified. So he didn't make the Gzeira, but he is the one who brings it to the table in the Gemara. Akol Chayavim the Kriyas Megillah. Everyone has an obligation to read the Megillah uvet Kiyas Shofar. Ve'ein akol b'kiyim b'mikra Megillah. But not everybody is a baki in reading Megillah. And similarly, ve'ein akol b'kiyim b'Kiyas Shofar. Gzeira shem yatlena b'yadai v'yelech eitzel baki lumad v'yavrena b'amis b'shosam. We are concerned that a person would end up doing a Chilul Shabbos Deraisa, which there is no waiver for. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer would disagree, but I don't think so. Hakol Chayavim. And so therefore there's a Gzeira Derabba.
But Megillah is not a Deraisa. It's a Rabbanan reading Megillah.
Correct.
So it makes sense that you would override a possible mistake of a Deraisa, like carrying Rishus Rabbin for a Rabbanan. But how can you go take out from Megillah? How does that compare to Shofar, which is Deraisa?
It was the same Gezerah. You're right that maybe the Shofar is a bigger Chiddush, but they're both part of the same Gezerah. Megillah is a biblical obligation, maybe not in the Chamisha Chumshei Torah.
Yeah.
But it's a biblical.
But reading Megillah is reading Megillah a biblical obligation, though? No.
I'm sorry, yeah, it's biblical. It's not from the 5 books of Moses, but it's within the.
But the mitzvah of listening to reading Megillah, that's not a Rabbanan because it came afterwards.
No, the mitzvah of Megillah is in Megillah. But you're right. Sometimes we'd call that mipi Kabbalah. It's from the Tanakh, but not from the Torah. But anyways, the bottom line is the facts, which again, I didn't want to go on a long tangent, but I just wanted to show it to you. At a certain point, the Chazal made a Gzeira, and that became in force. And it set aside all the other things we're learning in our Gemara here about Shofar. But it didn't undo the biblical fact, and therefore, for the purposes of our Gemara, we are checking it out.
So I guess the only one left is Bris. Bris we still do. Everything else got pushed off.
And by the way, this Gemara underscores the Chiddush of that Gzeira. The Gemara here is saying that Shofar is so special, so unique. It's in its own world. Because Shofar is Machnesses Zechron Shel Yisrael Avim Shebashamayim. Shofar is like that massive mitzvah that brings the Yidden together with Hashem. And the Chazal still pushed off. By the way, I'll give you a little spoiler alert or whatever. Chassidus, based on Kabbalistic writings, explain Now, first of all, the Gzera didn't apply in the Beis Hamikdash. So even in the time of the Gzera, where the people did not blow shofar in the diaspora or in their own home, they still blew shofar in the Beis Hamikdash. And Chassidus explains that sometimes, from the fact that the Chazal made such a Gzera, either as an indication or established a reality that whatever is usually accomplished with the sound of the shofar is accomplished without the sounding of the shofar. How is it accomplished? Well, possibly the brokenness that we feel and the strange lack that we feel when Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah coincide, it creates a nerve. We feel unnerved or anxious or we're missing something. That itself can fuel the intensity of the necessary emotions to bring the Jewish people closer to Hashem. That's just a little line in an excerpt. And that's again you might say a Hasidic justification, but I would say it's the Hasidic take on how this might work and why it might work. So Od Chazon LaMoed, we'll have opportunity to discuss this more at length, but I just wanted to give you the basic flavor of that discussion. And indeed, it is a big Chiddush. It's a big deal. And so Tosfos and Megillah, just one more moment while we're here. We defer, we push off, we cancel big mitzvahs, lulav, Megillah, shofar on Shabbos. Maybe we should also push off bris. We should push off Milah. Why don't we find our Gemara pushing off circumcision? So Tosfos in Megillah, which we just saw, actually makes that point. Aval Milah b'Shabbos in lidchais. We don't push aside circumcision. The hachamira, because bris is actually more strict than any of the other mitzvahs. There are 13 different covenants associated. So Rabbi, we're giving a one-liner to your question at the beginning of the Gemara. Furthermore, who does bris? Who is a moyel? Any yoke, not any yoke. Some very special Jews we know blow shofar, but shofar is more accessible than circumcision. I think we can all agree to that. Everyone might try to sound the shofar. Anyone who reads Hebrew might try to read the Megillah. Anyone who has two hands or even one hand might try to hold a lulav and esrog. Milah is a highly trained, professional trade. Rabbi, to answer your question, Ein adamal elim kain hababaki. You don't let a person do a circumcision unless they are baki. This sakana yesh bedavar, because it is a matter of life and death. Now, I do want to add one more thing. I'm pretty sure there was once a shaila brought to one of the Hasidic rabbis, maybe the Tzemach Tzedek. There were two moyels available. One was a very, very big Yireh Shamayim, a big tzaddik, but his cut was a little sloppy. And the other one was an unsophisticated person in the realm of deep esoterics, but he had a fantastic professional steady hand, and his circumcisions were fast, and I don't want to say bloodless, but at least and so they asked, who do we take? The Yireh Shamayim or the guy who's got a better cut? And the answer was, take the one who knows how to do a better job. Make sure that you get there. Oh, can we go? It's a little bit off tangent, but we're here. It's open. Let's continue. An interesting question. How is it possible that we allow folks to blow shofar after Yom Kippur? What's the problem? You're not allowed to do any malacha until you make Havdalah. Sounding a shofar, that sounds like a malacha. Anyone want to take a stab at what the answer is? What did our Gemara say about blowing shofar? Is it a malacha?
You need a bucky.
No, but it's a malacha. Well, it's not a malacha. That's going to be the answer. And second of all, Dr. Stamler's question. Maybe you're going to bring it to a bucky. Like Zera, we should have banned blowing shofar after Yom Kippur. The Tirith, Mishum Tkiya Shofar Chachma Ve'Malacha. Number one, our Gemara said blowing shofar is not a malacha. Begam Loy Chashinan Shama Yelech Eitzel Baki. We're also not afraid you're going to go to a Baki. The Mishum Tkiya Achash Sheina Elo Mishum Zecher LeYovel Loy Yitzrich Kulahai. Number two, the sounding of the shofar. It's one sound. It's not as important. It's only a Zecher LeYovel. So we're not afraid that you're going to make yourself Meshuga. Rosh Hashanah Deraisi. Basically, the Rosh Hashanah blowing is a whole lot more complicated and sophisticated. And so it's more likely that you're going to try to go to a rabbi to learn how to do it right. By the way, in modern society, in modern Jewish culture, the shofar blast on Yom Kippur is considered and perceived to be so much more important than the shofar of Rosh Hashanah, I believe. Now, I get where it's from, because Yom Kippur is generally perceived to be, not perceived, Yom Kippur generally has a lot of weight, even for Jews that maybe don't. Jews who don't observe Rosh Hashanah, they might come for Yom Kippur for the closing session. But from here we see that Yom Kippur, you just need a blow. Rosh Hashanah, it's complicated, it's important. Yeah.
I'm surprised that the blowing of shofar at the end of Yom Kippur goes back that far.
Tosfos?
And if it does,
hold on, what's that far?
Based on what?
Hold on, what's that far? Tell me, how far does it go?
Tosfos time, at least.
Okay, yeah. It's clearly an ancient and important.
But where's it based on? Anywhere discussed?
Yeah, it's the Zecher LeYovel. There's a verse that says that in Yom Kippur we sound the shofar. It's talking about Yovel. But to remember that mitzvah, which we don't have, we blow shofar at the end of Yom Kippur. Isn't that interesting? So Tosfos gives another answer, which also helps put things in context. Rabbeinu Shmuel, which I think is the Rashbam, says the dafka b'Shabbos u'b'Rosh Hashanah. It's dafka Shabbos that we don't let you blow, and on Rosh Hashanah. The imavire arba amas b'Rosh Hashanah. If you carry it in the public square, ika isur deraisa, there is a biblical problem. When Yom Kippur is over, let's say you didn't make Havdalah, the prohibition of carrying after Yom Kippur before Havdalah is only midrabanan. That would be a stretch. So an interesting Tosfos, very much related to our discussion about shofar.
Rabbi,
yes.
Just to make something clear, the walls of Jericho came down because of the shofar blowing.
Yes, this is true.
Which gives it significance.
Oh, certainly. But here we're asking a question about biblical halachic significance.
It's true.
So basically, you have to differentiate. It's not unimportant. I want to be very careful with what I'm saying. It's not that it's unimportant. It's just that there's certain facets that have more of a technical halachic application. There's others that give us the spirit. Or in Dr. Hammer's language, we have things that inform the Maisa, and then we have things that inform the Kavana, the Machshava, the spirit, and they're both very important. But here we're having a technical discussion that revolves more around if and when it's done. Once you know when and if it's done, we have to incorporate the machshava, the kavana, the ruach, and so they're not unimportant. I want to be very clear. It's just not. It waits until we clarify the technical halachic criteria. We have 1 minute left. I want to thank you all for making sure today is a good Gemara with a lot of discussion. We're now going to, so we finished probing all of the mitzvahs that were introduced. Omer, Shtei Halechem, Sukkah, Lulav, Matzah, and Shofar. 6 different holiday-oriented mitzvahs, all which we said that Rabbi Eliezer says you're allowed to push off Shabbos. All of them based on one or another diuk, a word in the Torah that's added, sometimes using a gzeira shava but all of them, Eliezer defends himself. In all of those instances, the Gemara probed why the Chachamim disagreed, And we showed that there were alternate limudim that the Chachamim needed to learn, which did not make the limud of Rabbi Eliezer available. I just want to remind us that Dr. Stamler and I think a few others asked a very good question, which I didn't fully answer, or I'm putting it in different words, but there's a lot to be done in the realm of why the Rabbanan prefer one direction and why Rabbi Eliezer prefer the other. And there's a lot of depth, especially in the Achronim, to understand what exactly is motivating the difference of the two perspectives. And so there's more to discuss, but as far as the essential conversation, this, I believe, concludes that. And now we're going to jump back tomorrow into the discussion of bris itself. And there are a number of facets that we know about or we think about, and we're going to see with Hashem's help in tomorrow's Gemara. So again, I want to thank everybody for your comments, your questions, and you're keeping it interesting. And Yasher Koyach. Thank you. We see everyone tomorrow. Gesundheit and Freiliche Heit. And we pray for only good news for all of Klal Yisrael.
Shakar.
Thank you.
you.
Shkoach.